Hey, everybody. We are so glad to have you here for another episode of Restored to More. Today, we are interviewing Matt Klein, who is the director of Restored Ministries. Let me tell you a little bit about him and all he's working on. He lives in Edmonton with his wife, Louise, and son, David. It is a huge honor for him to tackle the epidemic of pornography in our world through speaking, coaching, and digital platforms. Before founding Restored Ministries, he co-founded a nonprofit movement called Ladies Man, receiving ministry training through Gateway Family Church, and he got certified as a speaker and coach for the John Maxwell team and played hockey, WHL, and for Hockey Canada. Matt, thanks for being with us, man. We're so pumped to have you here. I love that your name is Restored, first of all, because obviously it lines up with everything we do at Restored to More. So thanks for being here, man. We're pumped.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I know I saw Restored to More with you guys even before we met, and I'm like, I love that name. I love it. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, can you share with our listeners a little background of who you are and where you are now today and what led you to be at the place that you're at today?
Sure, yeah. I grew up a hockey boy. I grew up also a pastor's kid. And so growing up, everybody's saying, are you going to be pastor? Are you going to be pastor? I'm like, no, I'm going to be a hockey guy. And so I committed everything to hockey. And I don't know in the States if that's as much of a big deal, but in Canada, that's a huge deal. And so I got to a point where I was playing high level and looked at for in the NHL and had an agent and scouts and all that stuff. And then I got a concussion that gave me headaches for 6 years. And so I didn't get to play hockey anymore. But going through that, I just learned relationship with Jesus that I never knew before. Growing up, even I was a pastor's kid, I'd always say, like, what's the relationship with Jesus? I never understood that. And so I look back at that time when I got hurt and I'm like, man, I'm grateful for that time because I just got to know a peace and I got to know Jesus and scripture like I never knew before. And so shortly after that, within a couple of years, I had this idea in my heart that I wanted to have an organization kind of like AA is what I would say, but for porn addicts in the church. Wow. And so that was something that I wanted to do later on in life. But at first I wanted to be a business guy. I wanted to make it big. I wanted to kind of be financially independent and then use my time and my money to start this organization. Wow. And then one day God just said to me, he's like, you know what you want to, or what you want to do in the future? I want you to do that now. And I was like, wow. What now? And he said, yeah, so I want you to do that now. And so here we are.
Wow, man. That's, I love being just casual in these podcasts. I think Chair and I are learning to get a little more casual as we go because we're business people. We've been entrepreneurs for 7 years. We're just transitioning right now into full-time ministry with a nonprofit. But I just went back to your story. Let's talk about hockey for a minute, dude. Like, yeah, I played roller hockey when I was a little kid in my neighborhood. I forgot about that until I talked to you, Matt, about that. But we put on our roller blades and we had our hockey sticks and we grabbed like a little rubber ball or something like that. We never played with a puck. We weren't that cool. But it was that was one of my, I really enjoyed that, man, playing that. And I always admired guys that could do it on ice. And then like, you guys are like, man, I don't know, some of the most gnarliest people in my opinion are hockey players. Cause then I feel like you guys are fighting as much as you're playing hockey. I don't know if that's true for your experience, but that's crazy, man.
It's funny. I'm probably more of a lover than a fighter in my personality, but once I got into junior, I was fighting. Wow. So it's just part of the game. And it's funny too. I'd always say like, I'm not tough enough for football or rugby or one of those sports. And guys would be like, but you play hockey. Like, I don't understand why you're saying that, but yeah, it's a fun game. It's a fun game.
But a lot of those guys hit each other with like pads and masks on, and all I see is hockey players rip off their mask and start slugging the other guy and all that stuff, man. So that's not
blood and broken teeth.
Yeah, man. Wow. So you're saying you did that. You had a vision at 15. Is that right? You said 15 years old or younger than that? What was your age where you said God gave you the vision for doing something like AA for Christians?
Gotcha. I was probably 20 or 21 when that idea came into my head. Yeah.
Cool, man. We were similar. I mean, with you, I definitely wanted to do business. I talked to Bill. We studied business. Both I and met in business school at college here in Southern Orange County. So that's awesome. So then you went and you actually, from what I've heard, you've actually started pursuing the business route for a little while. And that was when God called you out of that and was like, Matt, don't get distracted. Totally. I want you to do this right now. Is that right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that time was good for me. I learned a lot and I networked a lot. I grew a lot. I got into real estate a little bit. I had a couple of labor companies that I did, networking businesses, like different things that I tried. And I thought that would be my future and just diversify and build your income and income streams, and income streams are good, but that was the focus. And so, yeah, I was just so grateful when God called me out and gave me like a clear direction with his word, like, hey, I want you to start this ministry and I want you to do it now. And from there, I just learned how to live from practical intimacy with him. I say that word a lot. Practical intimacy is like, what does that mean? We learn intimacy with Christ, but like a lot of people hear that term, don't know what it means. And so after about a year and a half after he called me to ministry, was just seeking him and just learning about him. And it just propelled everything in my life. And so I'm so grateful that he called me out of business and even crushed those dreams, so to speak, to give me new dreams and bigger dreams that were more aligned with what he has for me.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's really cool.
So I feel like somebody just doesn't get a vision to do something unless it's close to their heart, or they've had a story or have been impacted in a traumatic way to want to make a difference in that area. And so can you share with us, why you wanted to even start doing something like that?
True. Yeah, that's a good question. I was 11 when I first saw pornography, and it's funny. The more I work with guys, pretty much every single time it's 11 years old, sometimes 13, sometimes 8, but most guys it's 11 when they're first exposed to porn, and even girls too. But that was the struggle for me for about 10 years. Just not really wanting it, but wanting it, right? Like that's the life of someone who's addicted to something they know is bad. Is you don't want it, you want it out of your life, but you just can't live without it. And I remember even standing in my kitchen and thinking, like, do I want to live the rest of my life without this? Because it had been such a crutch for me. And it had been the thing that brought excitement, or the thing that I did when I was bored or lonely. And so without that, what am I going to do? Like, if I don't have anything to do, that's what I would do. And so without that, I would just picture my life like, I don't know what to do when I'm bored. I don't know what to do when I'm alone, or when I feel bad, when I feel rejected. And so it's a crazy thing, but that was part of my life for 10 years. Then I took 2.5 years off, thought that I was free from porn forever, thought that it was just, I had made a good decision. It was my own strength, my own willpower, probably never even once gave credit to the Lord for freedom. And so I fell back in a couple of years later, and it was stronger than ever. And I remember just praying lots, like, God, I don't know why I can't quit. I quit for 2.5 years and I just can't stop doing this. And so it was another 2.5 years of struggle, more than ever. And at the same time, though, when I was praying to God for something to be strong enough for me to hold on to quit, I was also praying that I would just wanted to be used. I wanted to be used by him to impact the world. And I visualized myself just going around the world and speaking and impacting people. And so those two prayers kind of came together one day in a church service where I was just sitting down during the worship time, and God came and he whispered into my ear and he said, Matt, I want to use you, but I can't use you till you're pure. I need you to get free of this stuff. And so that was kind of the start of the journey.
Wow. So the motivation to like start getting really pure and working something really hard, and more so maybe doing it with God, was that the calling that I know God wants to do a greater work in me and through me through this whole thing. Is that right? I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And I think that was what I needed at the time, because he speaks to us in a way that we understand and speaks to us for where we're at. And so that was the first anchor, that this idea that I want to be used by him, and he's saying that he will use me, but I got to get this out of my life. And so that was an anchor for me. It was cool because I quit. And then 3 weeks later was when he said to me, Kate, and now I want you to go start this ministry.
Wow.
And so his timing was perfect. But what I learned was that a lot of people, they think about purpose. They think about, I want to do great things. I hear it often, like, I want to get rid of porn because I feel like it's limiting my impact. And I hear that all the time. And that was my anchor as well. But I learned that that's not the primary anchor. That's got to be a secondary thing, because the primary thing has to be that I just want to glorify God. I just want to live with him. I want to be free, and I want to be holy as he is holy. And so it's that idea that he wants us to be free, I think, more than he wants to work through us. And I think that he would actually be sad if he worked through me, impacting the world, but he'd be sad looking at me and going, but he's still trapped. Like, he's trapped himself. And so I learned that the anchor that I had at first was my purpose. But as my journey went on, I learned that that's a secondary thing to intimacy with him.
Wow.
You talked about how you were a pastor's kid. And so I'm assuming growing up in the church, yet struggling and having the secret sin. Did you try to talk to people about it? Did you feel like you couldn't talk to people about it? Can you share with us that kind of journey?
I did not tell people about it. It was my own thing. And it's like anybody thinks, yeah, I think I thought I was the only one doing it, right? I'd
Mm-hmm.
be in church Sunday morning thinking Saturday night what I did was I was the only one in the church that did that, which is so far from the truth. But that's what I would think. And so it's funny. I have a great relationship with my parents. They're awesome. They love me. I've never doubted that. But I didn't want to let them down. And so it wasn't necessarily the pressure because he was a pastor. It was just I didn't want to disappoint my parents. And so
Yeah.
when I started telling people about pornography, they were the last ones that I ever told. And
Wow.
in fact, I didn't even want to tell them. But when the Lord called me into doing this for a ministry, I was like, oh man, like I remember this thought, like I have to tell my parents. How can I do this without them knowing? And so that was kind of the final straw for me going forward to tell them.
Wow. I can't even imagine feeling just like all that. Just, I would feel like it would be just like this heavy, just weight on you, you know, especially going into church. Like, I feel like it's supposed to be the opposite. You know, we should be able to come to church and be like, accept me, you know, and here's all my junk and love me regardless, you know, because it's that example of Christ and it's seen in the Bible. There's so many stories of that with Jesus, yet we just don't feel that when we walk onto church. It's like we have to be perfect and have this performance based, you know, love. And it's just so sad. And yeah, it's just sad.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's the enemy's plan. I mean, he doesn't play fair. It's like I was saying, like 11 years old or 8 to 11 years old is first exposure. And kids don't know. Their brains aren't developed till they're 21 or 25 years old. And so we don't know as kids what this is going to do in our life, but we get hooked. And so it's the enemy's plan because he knows the destruction that it will cause. But we grow up and now we're in church and we're learning, or we're hearing sermons on worship and on freedom and on confessing sins and having community with different people and purpose and doing great things. But then we're like, but I'm trapped. Like, how can I spread the gospel of freedom and of victory when I'm defeated and I'm trapped? And so that there's so much power when in the church we talk about pornography and we talk about sexual immorality because it's rampant. And if you think about it too, sex is a covenant between a man and a wife that most represents the relationship that we have as people with God. And so if sex is the pinnacle, the covenant confirming activity that we get to participate in that mirrors the relationship with God, why is sex the thing that we don't talk about?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
So true.
And so we have to talk about this stuff and we've got to be educated because God's plan is incredible. Even the way he formed our bodies for covenant, it's incredible. And so there's so much good to talk about and we've just got to do it to set people free, like you're saying, Charity.
I love that, man. I think it's so important because I think what you're talking about is changing the conversations that are happening from the pulpit, that are happening in the small groups, that are happening in the youth group rooms, you know, the youth ministry conversations, the youth camps, because I would agree with you that like our stories are very similar in that regard. I saw porn at 11 years old. It was a traumatic experience because I wasn't even looking for porn. I wasn't looking for full like nudity, and it was like boom in my face and like that. And it was also the traumatic experience of the pornography, but also the hook of shame. Like this was so wrong. If I told anybody about this, I would be kicked out of the church. I'd be, I would be neglected for sure. And so what's crazy is if most people think like when your church talks about sex, is it normally in a positive light or a negative light? You know, and it's not that, I mean, I'm sure pastors will make jokes. It's like, yeah, that's what you do when you're married. But overarchingly, most of the time, it's sexual immorality. It's sexual outside
Lust,
of marriage.
temptation.
It's lust. Those verses that are all throughout the Bible that talk about sex in a way that is misused. And I think there are very important warnings that Paul writes about to the Corinthian church. And there's so many things that are important about warnings of having all these kinds of things. At the same time, though, it's not a conversation that we normally have with our pastors or youth pastors about sex being one of the most wonderful things that God ever created for us to experience unity with our wives and with God in a way that like you're talking about, the connection we can have with our wives is similar to the we have with God. And it's not, we don't get that picture painted. So if we're doing something like masturbation or looking at pornography, it is automatically put in that sexual immorality box. And that sex is bad. Sex outside of marriage is bad. Everything about sex is bad because we rarely talk about the good things, you know, and I'd love for you to expand on that if you'd like.
Yeah, and it's sad because there's often wives who really struggle in having sex once they're married, even if they've saved themselves from marriage. Number one, because their husband has watched so much pornography, but number two, because they've been told to stay away, stay away, stay away. This is
Yeah.
bad, and then all of a sudden they get married, and boom, it's the best thing ever. Like
Yeah.
it's a mind trip for people.
Yes. Yes.
And so yeah, it's hard for people to overcome. But I just want to share maybe just one thing about God's design for sex that just it blows my mind all the time.
Please.
There's this idea of covenant, right, that we talked about. And so when when Jesus is sacrificed on the cross, his blood flows. Every time there's a new covenant made in Scripture, there's always blood. There's always a death that takes place, and there's blood. And so usually it's with an animal. They slaughter an animal, they make a new covenant. Now Jesus is the lamb. His blood is slaughtered, or he's slaughtered, and so his blood is there. So if that's covenant, if covenant has to include blood, then how did God make our bodies for sex to be the thing that confirms covenant? Well, there's a thing called a hymen, and in culture and with the world, we talk about popping cherries, and it's just this funny thing that teenage boys talk about. But this is the crazy thing about God's design. He made a hymen for the woman so that the first time a man ever enters into the woman, there's blood that's spilled. It confirms a covenant. Just like when Jesus dies and the blood is there,
Yeah.
the veil is torn, and now we can enter into the kingdom of God, where we could never enter in before because we didn't have this covenant. Now we're in this new covenant. We can enter in by the blood of Jesus, and we're there forever. It's
Wow.
the holy place. That's why
Wow.
when a man first has sex with his wife, the hymen is broken. There's blood, and the guy goes, "Holy, holy, what's going on? This is good." And so the crazy thing, you guys, is that when we cut our arms, the skin will recover. The cut will recover. Like we'll get back to normal. A hymen never recovers. Once it's torn, it never comes back.
Wow.
It's really probably the only body part that does that. And to go one step further, if you look at the female gender in any other species, they don't have a hymen. It's only human beings that have a hymen, only women that have a hymen, because God is so serious about the sacred act of sex. And he's like, this is for covenant. This is for man and woman to confirm their commitment to each other forever. And so the enemy knows that, and he just makes a mockery of it through he makes a mockery of it through pornography. And it's so sad, but there's so much good to talk about.
Wow.
Why in the world am I just hearing about this?
First time ever. Cherry. No, I've never heard that. Cherry's mind blown. I'm mind blown.
It's wild. I'm mind blown too. It's crazy.
I can't believe
so
you're
glad
educating me on this right now.
you just educate Cherry about her body.
7 years up. Yeah. Like, what?
Thanks, Matt.
I'm 29 years old, 7 years married, 3 kids later, have had sex ed, like have had conversations. Never in my life have I been educated on that. And I got emotional. I just got emotional. I mean, there's so many real emotions that just happened right now. But number one is just how incredible the Lord is. Number two, it pisses me off that I'm just now being educated about this and nobody else is educating me, but I'm grateful for you, Matt. So thank you. But number three too, it's just like, gosh, it's just such a beautiful thing. And that's why I get emotional, is because God created this to be so beautiful. Yet the enemy has just twisted it, and he's just made it just this rotten, pop in your cherry, like you're saying. That's the only thing that I was educated on, was pop in your cherry. Never once educated on anything else. And so it makes me so sad that a young kid who was so vulnerable and willing to listen to anybody and believe it, just saying like, oh yeah, it's cool to pop your cherry, yet not know anything else, and being educated by kids at my school versus my parents, or versus church leaders, or what mentors. I'm like, man, it makes me sad, because I know that there's so many kids who aren't educated that need to be educated. And I know that would even help a lot of people probably change their perspective of sex so that they would remain pure. But instead it's a completely, Satan has distorted the view of it and been like, it's a cool thing to pop your cherry. Like like, what? Like, I could go on, but yeah.
And it's cooler to even if as a guy, it's cool to take the V card of multiple women. I mean, that's cooler than sleeping with someone who's not a virgin, right? It's because the cherries are being popped. So yeah, it's a crazy design. God is so mind blowing, and he's so in the details. It's just unreal.
Wow. I'm so glad you shared that with our listeners, and I'm so glad you're sharing that. I'm pumped that, I mean, our listener base is great. We're excited. It's growing, which is awesome. But I'm pumped that you're sharing this kind of stuff on stages, and you're teaching this stuff to kids, and you're teaching this stuff to young men. And that I know you have such a passion for men and women to find healing from this. And I love that these are just one of the many topics that you're talking about with Restored. That's a big deal. And I just think, man, I personally wish I knew that, because I'm going, man, like, I was a believer at 7 years old. I did love Jesus. And I think there are other kids that give their life to the Lord at a young age. They want to submit to God. And I believe that there are young men that if they were taught that, they would treat sex with more sacredness. I really do think that a lot of times we don't give young boys and girls enough credit to think for themselves. And I understand their brain's not fully developed. We continue to take away rights from young children versus educate them with the right information so that they can make better decisions. And I think one thing that talk, I'm like, man, I'm so excited to teach my 3 boys that. I'm so excited to tell them that this is a sacred thing, and taking this from a girl is something you don't want to take. You don't want to take this from somebody. You want it to be given to you. You want this to be given to you in the sacredness and the bond and the covenant of marriage. And so yeah, man, that was awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Matt. That was really, really good stuff. It's crazy. And let's be real for a minute. When you start sharing, my body was like, oh, like my little butt clenched up. You know, I'm like, oh man, like, should we be talking about this stuff? You know, like, oh man, I'm squeezing Cher's leg. Okay, we're going to cut this part out of the podcast. You know, and I'm like, in reality, that only took like a second. Then I dismissed all those thoughts. I was like, this is awesome. But it's amazing how I'm 30 years old. And why is that awkward? Because we're not talking about this stuff enough, right? We're not having these conversations enough in our, this should be sex education when you're in, 5th grade, 6th grade, and you take it for sex ed class. Like, these should be things that we're talking about if we can put that Christian education on sexuality, because sexuality taught by secular mindset is completely different than having a sexual education class from the viewpoint of God's word and the bond and the covenant of those things. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing to be experienced in the right way. And I love that. I love that you're talking about that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. The first conference that we ever did, it was so funny. I opened up with God's design for sex. And in that conversation, in that message, I talked about the hymen, but I also talked about masturbation from a biblical perspective. And this guy, after, he'd never met me, but he goes, I never in a million years thought I'd wake up and hymens first thing to start my day. But the thing is, you got to talk about it. People are like, man, I don't know where masturbation is in the Bible because it's not mentioned. Is this okay? Is it not okay? There's so much shame, confusion about it. This stuff we've just got to talk about, and it's all good. Like, there's a positive frame of mindset that we can talk about it because God made it, and so it has to be good.
Totally.
Yeah, there's so much I feel like I could talk about that, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was mind blowing for me. So
it is mind blowing. I understand.
Now you've got me thinking all day today. But I would love for us to ask, do you want to ask this question?
I don't know what you're pointing at, so go for it.
I would love to just, talk about, for you and your story, how did pornography use negatively affect your life?
Well, I remember after I quit porn the first time, I did fall back a couple of years later, but I quit porn and I was driving around a parking lot, and it had probably been a couple weeks or couple months after I had quit. And I just remember having this kind of revelation, this moment where I realized I don't need to lie to people. Like, I can let them in. And so there had been 10 years of learning how to lie, where that's not my personality. I'm a nice guy. I want to tell the truth. Like, I'm not a deceitful person, but porn taught me to lie, and it taught me to hide, and it taught me to put on this facade. And so after I quit, I remember literally having this moment in my car, like, I don't have to lie anymore. And it's I can go back to when I first started having real, authentic friendships in my life, and it directly coincides with when I quit porn.
Wow.
Because it taught me to lie and it taught me to hide, but it also taught me to that when I was bored, that's what I went to. I didn't need to call friends. I had a source of entertainment that was so destructive. And so that was the first thing. Then when I quit porn the second time, and for the final time, then I realized, like, I don't have to go. this is what I'm trying to say. When I'm bored, I can be creative. When I'm bored, I can think and I can dream and I can put productive energy towards things that actually matter, whether it's casual, whether it's hanging out with friends and encouraging them, volunteering, building a ministry, business, whatever it is. But when I quit porn, it was like, now I need to understand and learn how to use boredom, how to use loneliness, even how to use rejection and negative emotion to build my intimacy with Jesus, because often people feel rejected or offended or mad or disappointed. And that's the thing that leads to porn. But when you understand that all of those things are good things because they lead you into this relationship with Jesus, where now he's the one that fulfills, and we don't have idols in our life that we're looking to get affirmed from work or from our spouse, and we're putting them on this pedestal that when they fail, now we go to pornography because we're not doing okay. When we learn that those are idols and we can actually just get affirmed in the Lord, man, that changes everything. And so I think, to answer your question, those are major ways that porn robbed me of things in my life. Was it robbed me of being honest with people,
Yeah.
of having friendships, and just being able to be creative and move forward and make an impact in the world.
I love that, Matt. Thanks for sharing. What would you say really is getting these guys and the women? Because I want to keep saying that. I know that we don't deal a lot with men and women getting free from pornography. Most of our cases that we work with are husbands and then wives are the betrayed. But what are you finding is really helping these men and women find freedom from pornography use? The different terminologies out there, whether it calls addiction or not, or a stronghold or a struggle. What are you finding are the key elements to them finding lasting freedom?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, there's different processes and journeys for each person. And so we do one-on-one coaching with people, and we have small groups where they get led and they learn how to lead each other, and they learn how to coach each other even through it. There's always somebody facilitating the groups that's had some freedom and that's been trained in this stuff. And so it's different for each person. But to give general principles, because biblically there are principles that we can go off of. So to give a general answer, because there are general principles in the Bible, is walk in the light. This is scripture. Walk in the light as he is in the light, and have fellowship with one another. Get everything out. And this is what I want to encourage people to do, and get everything out with people, like with people who want to walk with you, not just, with one counselor, one pastor, but like have friends in your life. Have people in your life that walk with you every day, and also get that professional help as well if you need it. But it's not just porn. We talk so much about porn, and that's okay. But Jesus talked about porneia, which is in Matthew 5, which is sexual immorality. Like, it's all sexual immorality. And that's when he says, even thinking lustfully about a woman is committing adultery. And so we think about porn, but when I say get everything out, like walk in the light, bring everything into the light, talk about your fantasies. Talk about, like, you know what? I have incestual fantasies. I crave anal sex. I crave homosexual pornography. Even though I'm married, and I've married for 30 years to somebody of the opposite gender, I'm attracted to people of my own gender. So get out the fantasies in porn is what we talk about. And so people like, man, watching porn a week and I'm masturbating 5. But then there's still so much shame about, like, actually my fantasies are incestual. And if people knew that about me, I mean, I certainly can't tell them that. So when we talk about walking the light, like, get everything out, because what you're going to receive back from the majority of people, at least, is love and acceptance and approval. And, like, this isn't who you are. This is a deception that you've fallen into, but who you are is loved and accepted and incredible and made in God's image. And so that's a general answer, but that's a really good start for people. Get everything out and get people in your life to help you.
I love that. And obviously, like you said, it's important that's why it's really important to say there's not a one size fits all, but really having somebody that's going to coach you or walk you through it or walk with you, because that person with specialized knowledge might go, hey, let's try this first. And if this doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean you're a total failure. It doesn't mean like you're farther gone than somebody else. It just means that this was designed for these people and you're not one of those people. So let's go to this program. And I think that's what a lot of people lack, in my opinion. I think that for me, I didn't have anybody walking with me. I mean, if there is, I haven't talked to Charity about this yet, so we'll talk about it afterward. But I just feel like if there's one calling that Charity and I have that overarches everything that Restored to More is about, it's walking with other couples. It's walk with them. And that's going to play out in different ways for different people. But the epitome of walking with somebody is being there even when they're struggling, as they're going through the restoration process, as they're in recovery, as they're trying different things. Because I think what people lack is they jump into a workbook, they jump into a intensive, they jump into a therapy. And then if that one thing they tried didn't work, they feel like a total failure. They feel too far gone. And did they finish the program? Well, I didn't finish the program. So it just continues the shame cycle versus having somebody that says, hey, let's walk with you in this. The other thing I want to comment on what you just said is I think it's so true, as at least what we believe, because we believe that freedom is found when the person enters into community, right? If they are trying to be isolated and they're trying to fight this battle alone, even as a husband who's committed infidelity, as a wife who's going through betrayal trauma, these things were not meant to be done alone. We were absolutely created for community. And that's what I hear you saying is one of those key components to freedom long-term is being in community with somebody else or other people, men and women who are also in the fight, understand the fight, are getting to give you grace for the things that you struggle with, and are going to love you no matter what you're battling. And I think that is just so important. I love that you said most people are going to respond with love. It's important to realize that not everybody is. Because some people are so in their own shame that hurt people. And they're going to say hurtful things because they've never felt that forgiveness. They've never felt that they could ever open up with somebody else. And so they might not even receive it with love, but just go to the next person, because there will be people that have gone through it, especially when it's their story and they are in this area. Those people, in my opinion, are the most understanding, loving, forgiving, all that stuff for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing with that is that everything Jesus did was outward. He didn't do anything with a motive just for himself. And so when we're watching who we share with, we don't want to share with somebody who will negatively react to us, because it's just gonna give them more ammo for them to have hurt and bitterness in their heart and to gossip about people. And so it's just gonna lead them in a destructive path. So we do have to be careful, especially early on, with who we share with. But we can't use that as an excuse. Like, I don't have anybody. No, like, just find a pastor. There's people that drive to a different city and walk into a church and find a pastor just because they need to start. They need to start sharing. And so it is super important. To go off of what you're saying though, like, what do people have to do? That's to start, get everything out and walk in the community. But from there, you got to grow. Like, you have to learn how to handle emotions, how to handle disappointments, rejections, the hard things in life, the good things in life, not get too high. Because the reality is, even my strengths are given to me from the Lord. My weaknesses, I think, I'm formed with my weaknesses for a purpose as well. And so we've got to have God's perspective on every negative and positive situation in life. And so I just really, to our guys in our group, in our ministry, I say this, I say, God is an eternal optimist. He sees opportunity in every problem. And so if you have a negative perspective about something, what's God's perspective? And learn how to get that cemented in you and established in you so that it becomes your second nature.
So good.
Since you brought up, I feel like it's a good segue, but the Lord, what was your view of God before pornography, and how has it transformed your view of God today?
Good question. I'm glad you asked. I remember so many times after watching pornography going, tomorrow's going to be a bad day. Something's going to go wrong. God's going to be mad at me. He's going to make something go wrong. He won't bless me. And then days would go on and they'd be fine. And I'd be like, that's not what I expected. But then the next time I watch porn, I'd be like, oh, he's going to punish me again. And so it didn't line up with my reality, but just my thinking was like, he's going to punish me. But the reality is that's a before Jesus mentality, where it's like, sure, you're gonna be punished for your sins. The reality is Jesus forgave us. The last person that ever had to ask for forgiveness was Jesus 2,000 years ago. Forgiveness is there for us to receive. We don't need to desperately beg out from a place of deficit, because we already have forgiveness in full. And so having that understanding of who God truly is and seeking him with a pure heart and an open heart, not riddled with shame, has really transformed just my understanding that I'm a son and there's nothing that I can do that will take me away from his love. And he just believes in me. And so every time I screw up, he's sad that I've screwed up, but he's like, I want to teach you how to live better. I want to teach you how to live holy. And I'm proud of you and I'm cheering you on and I'm encouraging you. And he does not have wrath on you because you sin. he has wrath on this sin because of what it's doing to you. And I think that's the biggest thing that changed for me, and really for a lot of people as well.
I love that.
That was really good. Really powerful.
So such good stuff to talk about. You know, I think it goes back to our mission really is helping wives understand what their husbands go through when they're battling addiction, and as they're fighting for freedom from sexual, all of the whole struggle. And what we're talking about is consistently, hopefully just showing the wives out there, in my opinion, that this is way beyond you. This is way before you. It's beyond you. You know, if a guy is having addicted sex, it's not because he's dissatisfied with your performance in the bedroom. It's not because of the type of sex you're having or the positions of sex that you're having. There is a fundamental brokenness right now if a guy's doing that in the way he thinks and what he believes. And for me, it was really those core beliefs that I have to act a certain way. Sex has to be a certain kind of thing for it to be enjoyable. And that's only because I didn't understand really what sex is all about. And I just love talking to the wives. I love saying that from the guy's standpoint, that we didn't know the effects we were having on the wives. We didn't know the effects that we were hurting Charity. I had no idea, that what I was doing was causing so much pain. And it wasn't because of anything that you lacked. It wasn't because your body lacked something. It wasn't because in the bedroom you lacked anything. It was because there was a brokenness. And it wasn't even just a brokenness in my mind about pornography. There was a spiritual brokenness, right? There was a spiritual lack that I thought that I had to be a certain way for God to accept me. I had to be a certain way for him to love me. And I just couldn't imagine that with all my faults and failures and sins and things I had done, that God could still accept me for who I am. And so I was trying to create that in my own marriage, trying to be somebody I wasn't, to find that acceptance, to find that love. And I just think it's a continual reminder for me to keep saying that stuff for sure. Now, Matt, your story is that you started Restored. Did you start Restored when you were married, or was it before you were married? Tell me about that whole process.
So I was done with porn, and then I started working under a guy. I started just kind of learning how to run a ministry. And in the midst of that is when I got married.
Wow.
Met my wife and got married within 6 months. It was quick.
Wow.
So we did that. And then about a year and a half after we got married is when we started Restored, and it's been incredible.
Wow.
So yeah, I was married, and thankfully I wasn't married when I was watching porn either.
Yeah. Okay, I got a question about this. I'm just feeling this. Every time you say I was done with porn. Okay, so and this is part of my flesh for sure, right? Part of my flesh would hear guys like you say, "Oh, I was done with porn." I'm just like, "Oh, I hate you." Like, I'm just gonna be honest. It's like, frick you, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, man, because my whole life I wanted to be done with porn. I wanted to be done with this, right? And I'm sure you get this. It's just a candid conversation I wanted to have with you about. Okay, so when people hear that and they try to compare their journey to yours, we know that has more to say about me than about you. It's not even about you. It's about me and the comparison journey that God has me on. So talk to me about that. When someone says, well, Matt, what the heck, dude, you just quit porn. I've been trying to quit my whole life. Does God love you more than me? I'm sure you get this from guys. What do you tell them when they're trying to compare their journey to yours or to somebody else's, and they don't understand why theirs looks and feels different?
Yeah, if you're listening and you can relate to what Clinton's saying, you're not alone. There's a lot of guys that feel that. Because the reason, though, that you feel that is because you so badly want to be done with porn. And so I just think you have such a good heart. Your heart is in the right place. And so I want to encourage you with that if you're relating to that. But if you're comparing to where I am now, you're not comparing to where I was. I was struggling. I remember my roommates leaving for a weekend, looking back at me as they walked out the door and saying, "What are you going to do this weekend?" And I said, "I don't know." But in my head, I'm like, I'm going to watch porn all weekend long. And I did. That's exactly what I did. And so you're not comparing to where I was. I was where you are. I was where you were at. And so I would just say this, and this isn't a bragging thing at all. This is it's humbling to be able to say this because it's the Lord, but I've developed a skill set, so to speak, a spiritual or emotional skill set to be able to handle life differently than I used to. And so when I talk about practical intimacy with Jesus, it's different than the intimacy that I strived for in the past. And so for you, if that's your struggle, like if porn is your struggle, okay, this is what you got to learn. Porn use highlights where you need to be discipled in your life. So what leads you to porn? Is it every time you're feeling depressed about where you're at in life? Maybe you're what Clinton is saying. Maybe you're comparing to other people, and you've just got to learn how to surrender your dreams and surrender where you want to be to where you are now, and surrender that to the Lord. And so maybe if disappointment is a thing that leads you to porn, you got to be discipled in the area of disappointment. If you're having fights at work or fights at home and that leads you to porn, maybe you got to be discipled and learn how to handle fights differently or handle tension differently, and how to see conflict in a positive way, because conflict can be a great thing for relationships. And so whatever's leading you to porn is the thing that you need to be discipled in. And I would just say that that's something that I've learned. And if you're stuck in porn, that's something that you've got to learn. And don't compare to people who are ahead of you. Just learn from them. And God is no respecter of persons. He'll do in you what he's done in other people. And so be encouraged with that.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Matt. That was gold, man, because it's so true. The comparison is just a revealing of somebody's heart and their struggle. And I love what you said too, that yet also the comparison is a realization of, hey, you're only saying that because you want freedom. So let's talk about how to understand those areas. And we've said that the different areas, as we've said, it's more of a core belief, right? There's things that happen in life that trigger a core belief sometimes. And that core belief, if it's not rooted in Christ, we need to be discipled in that area to actually understand how accepted we are by God, how loved we are by God, how we don't need to perform for love with God. And all these areas you're talking about are just like, boom, we're like, dude, for sure. Like,
Totally.
hit the nail on the head, man. That's great stuff.
Totally. And it's the same with wives. It's with porn use with husbands or wives sometimes. But if the wife is dealing with betrayal, she's got to be discipled in how do you handle anger? How do you handle betrayal? How do you forgive? How do you forgive as Jesus forgave, which is never forgiving so that your own soul will be set free? That's what we say in the church. That's what people say in self-help. Better forgive so that your own soul doesn't end up in bitterness. But Jesus wasn't hanging on the cross, being, nailed to the cross, forgiving his abusers in the moment that he was being hurt by them so that his own soul would be free. That was never his intention. His intention was that they would experience the love of God. And so as a wife, you've got to bring it into light, walk in community and fellowship with people in your life. But when you're dealing with your husband, you've got to learn how to love and how to encourage and how to see the best in him and how to die to self and all of these things, not sin in our anger. We've got to learn all of these things, as hard as it is, but it's the same. You got to be discipled in the areas that you sin or that you struggled. And it's the same for men and women.
And that's a process.
Yes. And that's okay. We're all on a process and it is okay. And so just don't be ashamed or condemned or not where somebody else is with forgiveness or whatever, but don't stay where you are. Just know that it's a process, but be on the process.
Love that, Matt. Well, man, as we wrap up this podcast, we would love to hear about Restored and what you guys are doing right now and what your vision is for the future. Just please take some time right now and talk to us and our listeners about what Restored is. Let's start there. What is Restored doing right now? What are the offerings that you guys have created so far for people that need help?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. So the main thing that I push people towards is the Pure Freedom Journey. The Pure Freedom Journey is for men and women struggling with pornography. And there's community, there's interaction with lots of different trainers through Facebook Live. There's weekly trainings that are produced by video and audio and transcript. And there's exercises with the trainings. And so it's a year program. We're building it out right now. So as we speak, we're 28 weeks into it. And so once we'll get to 52 weeks, that's the program. And so I just encourage so many people. It's endless. The testimonies that come in from Pure Freedom Journey, it just keeps on coming. And so there's even guys who are struggling for 30 years with porn from day one. They've been done with porn and they're on this process of growing. And so it's so cool. There's other people that aren't there. They're struggling after months, but they're at least changing the way that they pray, changing the way that they're in community. And so I encourage people, go to the Pure Freedom Journey at the programs tab at Restored. In fact, it's on just restoredministries.ca on the homepage as well. And there's one-on-one coaching available sometimes. We're maxed out at times as well, but I think right now there's a couple spots. But you can always inquire about coaching. What I would encourage everybody to do is take advantage of the War on Porn campaign right now. We're looking for signatures on a petition to get age verification on every single porn site in Canada and the US. And the reason is because there's no age verification. There is for booze, there is for cigarettes, there is even for certain movies in theaters, but not for porn sites. And so there's technology that they can use to verify that people are over 18. Not a perfect process, but a lot better than it is right now. And so
Yeah.
it's to protect our kids. And so you can go to restoredministries.ca and sign the petition in your country, in Canada, in the US, to do that.
Restoredministries.ca.
I'll put it in the show notes so our listeners can go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, that is awesome, man. I love all you guys are working on, all that God has empowered you to create. Now talk to us about where you're going. What's the vision for Restored that you have? Do you have anything that you're going, man, in a year from now, this is what we can't wait to produce, just so our listeners can be excited for what's coming out too?
Yeah. So Jesus endured the cross, right? He endured the suffering for the joy that was set before him, which I believe was the fulfillment of his purpose, fulfillment of like bringing the people to God and glorifying God in the ultimate way. And so it was this fulfillment of his purpose that gave him the strength because he so wanted to honor God and bless people, to endure what he was going through. And so as part of our process, we want people to endure the temptation, the suffering, the whatever they go through with pornography, because they have so much more. And so when you learn who you are in Christ, evidently that leads to impact. And so what I'm excited for is this multiplication that we're working on right now and developing leaders. And it's within the Pure Freedom journey. But like I was saying earlier, we've got guys that lead these groups, and we've got there's different things coming, but that's what I'm excited about, is the leadership development and making space for so many people to go through the resources and the training, be transformed, and then use that to impact other people.
So good.
Love that, Matt. So good, man. Well, we're so excited. Thanks again for being with us on the Restored to More podcast. Thank you for doing all that you're doing with Restored. We can't wait to talk again soon. And I just believe with all my heart that this recording is going to impact people in a very, very powerful way. We can't wait to see the response we get from today's interview. Thanks, Matt.
Love it, you guys. Thanks for everything you do. You're awesome.
Thank you.